Hello, my name is Jacob Martinez, and today I'll be talking about a controversial, not so new way how we collect our oil. So, as I was doing my research, I saw this quote by Jens Stoltenberg. He's a politician in Europe, but this quote kind of stuck out to me. Is, by voting, we voice our opinions that changes the basis for our actions. Now, it stood out to me because I will be talking about hydraulic fracturing. Now, hydraulic fracturing is very different because just the fact of how controversial it is, it's our decision of where it is, the pricing of it, and overall if it's done correctly. So this quote stood out to me because of these three main subjects. Is if we are able to vote for it, we'll be able to vote if it's right behind the school, if we're able to see it or not, on the oceans, just by our votes. Now, the second part of this is being well educated. Talking to you today, if I didn't talk to you about hydraulic fracturing, if somebody came up to you right now and talked to you, vote on this subject, would you be able to do it educatively and doing it to your own process? No. So by this quote, it just stood out to me. So today I'll be talking about three main points. First, I'll be talking about the history of hydraulic fracturing and the past to the present. Second, I'll be talking about the techniques of hydraulic fracturing, how it's made and how it differs from conventional. Third, I'll be talking about the global cause and effects of fracking all over the world, not just in the United States. So first, I'll be talking about the history of hydraulic fracturing. Now, hydraulic fracturing, the actual fracking of the rock, started in 1947 by drilling straight down, all the way down, not as far as we can today. They would set down explosives all the way down and explode the rock by cracking the rock. But sometimes the explosives wouldn't work, so they would send down bigger explosions. Now, these bigger explosions didn't work very well with the borehole. Now, the borehole is just one vertical line going all the way down. Now, that line would break sometimes, so that was very expensive, so they would have to re-drill, find a new area, and go straight down. So that it didn't work very well. Now, they used liquid nitroglycerin to drop down these holes, and it would explode all the way down this entire tunnel, which is not very well. You're exploding with gas and natural gas. That don't mix. So back then it was already flawed. It didn't work very well. So with newer technology and different techniques, we were able to come with hydraulic fracturing. By using pressure and a little bit of explosives, not a lot, we were able to get this new technique. So, next subject is number 2, is the actual techniques going behind this new way of hydraulic fracturing. Now, this new hydraulic fracturing is the same concept of drilling straight down. Now, when we drill straight down, we are going a lot deeper, and so deep that we're passing these water holes that we are passing. So we've made different techniques of how the actual tunnel is made. So it's safer, more efficient, and easier to get to. So the first one I would like to talk about is the actual drilling of it. So the actual drilling of the hydraulic fracturing is, it goes straight down miles deep, farther than we've ever gone before. So as we're going down, as we drill all the way down, we hit the point where there's a layer of rock called shale. Now this shale is solid rock that holds oil and natural gas. So from that point on, we start curving. So once we curve to the right or left, depending on what the location of the rock is, once we start curving, we send one steel rod that goes all the way down straight up on the vertical hole. So once we're on this vertical hole, it covers. That's your first shield. So before we actually start exploding and taking the natural gas, it takes it. So the next step would be pumping concrete down the center of this hole. So once we're pumping it down and pushing it out the side of this tunnel. So as we're pumping, we pump it all the way to the very, very tip top of the tunnel, so you have a second guard. Now, depending on the location of this drilling, they can also set another guard all the way down the center of it, so for another third precautionary. Because like I said, you're going so deep, you're passing your own drinking water. So if it were to leak, that would be very bad. So these three precautions are very important. So once we have all these three garters, we can now start to drill and take the oil/natural oil. So now that we start drilling, we bring this pipe down. And as this pipe goes all the way down, it starts curving. And once it hits the end of the designation, once it can start using these small explosives. Now what I mean by small explosives is these inch-long explosives, this big, creating just a hole in this solid rock. So the pressure of this hydraulic fluid can start cracking the rock and making fingers. Now, with these explosions, this tube has a wall. So once it explodes these little tiny holes in the rock, the fluid starts coming through. And this wall is very important. So when the fluid goes through, instead of creating another explosion that could rupture the line or use this natural gas and create another explosion, it uses pressure, and enormous amounts of pressure that pushes these rocks together, so when it gets together, it cracks, creating these little fractures down here, also called fingers. So as it's doing that, this hydraulic fluid is very important. Now this hydraulic fluid has sand and other additives, but lots and lots of water. 0.5 of every session of fracking or drilling is these little chemicals. Now, like Shane said, these chemicals are very, very toxic. So it is, if it were to get out, it's very bad for our drinking water. That's why these three precautions, or two, depending on the location, is implemented. So now that we take out this fluid, these natural gas and oil are able to go into the tube. There's nowhere else they can go. It can't go up, it can go down back into our tube, but nowhere else. So now that we're capturing this oil, the wall is set up so the tube can start moving backwards and duplicate the process all the way down for miles. So you are literally using all of the product through the whole system. So you're not just using one little part. So after we start getting the oil and we take the fluid back up to the trucks and we use it there so we can use it for the same location. But mind you, all rocks are different. No rocks are the same depending on your location. So for chemicals, we have over 700 different types of chemical combinations for the different types of rock. So that's a lot of chemical. Now that brings me into the next subject, pollution. Now the pollution is very important to me because fracking, that's why it makes it so that's why it makes it so different. The other wells would just take up the oil and that would be our subject. But now with these new fluids, if it gets into any water source, like I said before, if it gets into one of those water wells, it can completely ruin the water. Because tests have shown that even if we clean the water that has this fluid in it, it's still not able to drink. So these precautionaries are very important. Now, the way that they just take away this fluid is it's horrible. Now, the way they take away this fluid is by putting it back in the earth. They don't take it up and send it out of space where space is unlimited. They put a cap on the hole, push down the fluid back into the floor, and hopefully it'll stay there for the rest. And we haven't been doing this process for hundreds of years, so we don't know what the repercussions are going to be. So all those fluids that are in the ground right now are by cracked rock. So if they were to get through and go into our water source, who's to say that can't happen? So now for the global economics of it, being over in Europe, fracking is needed because Europe is getting their natural gas from Russia. If we can cut off Europe from Russia from getting their natural gas, it will not only hurt Russia, but it might be a good thing to start staying away from Russian being with Syria and supporting all these different things. So I feel that Europe needs natural fuel and it needs to be self-sufficient. In fact, it will help us, because if we can have Europe have their own natural gas, we don't need OPEC. We wouldn't need to have this expensive fuel and have to negotiate with them. We'll be able to negotiate with Europe. We'll be able to negotiate with our friends. It'll be cheaper for us, but then again, it all has to do with our voting. Now, you can vote for this subject and you can vote correctly by this explanation. You will know by the end of this how to vote correctly on what you want to happen. And that is my speech. Thank you very much.